The war ended not with celebration, but with silence. Survivor Lena Shin floated in the pilot seat of her damaged fighter, watching the last void hunger entity dissolve across multiple dimensions. Around her, space was filled with the wreckage of the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from 100 worlds drifted in the darkness, some intact, others twisted into impossible shapes by weapons that attacked reality itself. "This is Nexus Prime Command," came a tired voice over the communications system. "All units report status." Lena checked her instruments. Her ship was barely functional, held together by emergency patches and prayer. Like most of the survivors, she had been fighting for 3 years without rest. "Fighter 77 Alpha reporting," she said. "Alive and functional." It was more than most could say. The void hunger was gone, finally and completely destroyed. But the victory had cost the galaxy everything it had, and more than it could afford to lose. The numbers were staggering. 70% of human space lay in ruins. Half the species in the galaxy had been reduced to refugee populations living on borrowed worlds. Entire star systems had been pulled into dimensional rifts that might never heal. But the worst losses weren't counted in ships or planets. They were counted in the people who had volunteered to become part of the ancient weapons. 2 million. Humans had given up their individual existence to merge with the defensive systems. They were still alive in a sense, but they were no longer people. They had become living components of machines designed to guard against horrors from another dimension. Lena guided her fighter toward the remains of Luna Station. Earth's moon was dark now, its surface scarred by the energies it had channeled during the final battle. The planet below looked different too. The hidden weapons arrays had emerged permanently, turning the world into a fortress that could never again pretend to be a simple, peaceful place. President Bo-Ra Moon was waiting in what remained of the station's command center. She looked older now, aged by 3 years of impossible decisions. Around her, the surviving leadership of humanity and the galaxy tried to make sense of what they had won. "How many?" President Moon asked as Lena entered the room. 17 fighters returned from my squadron," Lena reported. "Out of 200. President Moon nodded slowly. It was the same story everywhere. The ancient weapons had saved the galaxy, but they had consumed the people who used them. Historian Chung Min-yoon was documenting everything for the records. His job was to make sure that future generations would understand what had happened and what it had cost. "The integration centers are shutting down," he reported. "All the volunteers who are going to merge with the systems have already done, so the weapons are at full power." "And the galactic civilizations?" President Moon asked. "Rebuilding. The Council has voted to create a new capital on Kepler Prime, since Nexus Prime was destroyed. They're calling it the Unity System." President Moon walked to the window that looked out at Earth. The planet was beautiful and terrible now, its true nature finally revealed. Weapons arrays glowed beneath the oceans. The continents pulsed with energy flows that connected defensive systems across the globe. "They want us to rule," she said quietly. Everyone in the room knew what she meant. The galactic civilizations had offered humanity leadership of the new government. They had seen what ancient technology could do. They had watched humans sacrifice themselves to save species they barely knew. The galaxy wanted the ancients to take their rightful place as the rulers of known space. "And if we do?" asked elder statesman Jae Sung-ko. He was one of the few original council members to survive the war. "Then we become the target again," President Moon replied. "Our presence in the galaxy, actively using ancient technology, will eventually attract attention from other dimensions." The void hunger wasn't the only threat out there. Dr. So-Young Park, now the head of ancient studies, brought up the holographic displays that showed the current state of the galaxy. Human technology was everywhere. Now ancient weapons protecting trade routes, reality disruption shields around major population centers, dimensional sensors watching for new threats. "The infrastructure is in place," she said. "The galaxy is protected by systems that only we can operate. If we withdraw now, who will maintain them?" "The integrated volunteers," President Moon said. "The 2 million humans who became part of the machines. They're still conscious, still thinking. They can operate the systems without direct human oversight. Lena had met some of the integrated volunteers. They appeared as holographic projections now, their consciousness distributed across the ancient network. They were still human in their thoughts and memories, but they existed as part of something larger. Is that enough? Changmin asked. Can 2 million minds, even integrated with ancient technology, protect the entire galaxy? They'll have to be, President Moon said, because we're going to do what our ancestors should have done 50,000 years ago. She turned to face the room. We're going to disappear again, but this time, we're going to do it right. The plan was simple and terrible. Humanity would fade from galactic consciousness, but not completely. Instead of hiding on a single world, they would spread throughout the galaxy as ordinary citizens of other civilizations, humans living normal lives on alien worlds, indistinguishable from refugees or immigrants. But these hidden humans would be different. They would carry dormant ancient technology in their genetic code. If the galaxy ever faced another dimensional threat, the technology would activate, and the descendants of the ancients would emerge from hiding once again. We become a sleeper species, Dr. Park explained. Present, but invisible. Ready, but hidden. Elder Statesman Ko raised an objection. What about Earth? What about our home? Earth will be officially classified as a restricted research world, President Moon said. Too dangerous for habitation due to unstable ancient technology. The other species will respect the quarantine. In reality, Earth would become the command center for the hidden human network. A small population would remain to maintain the planetary systems and coordinate with the integrated volunteers. But to the galaxy it would appear that humans had nearly died out, reduced to a handful of researchers and technicians. Lena understood the implications. We're giving up everything again. Yes, President Moon said simply. Our cities, our colonies, our place in galactic society. We're becoming myths once more. But this time we'll remember, Changmin pointed out. The knowledge won't be lost. Every hidden human will know the truth about our history. President Moon activated a final display, showing the proposed distribution of human populations across the galaxy. Thousands of worlds would receive small numbers of human refugees. These people would integrate into local societies, have families, and live normal lives. Their children would carry the genetic markers of the ancients but would never know it unless the galaxy faced another existential threat. The Galactic Council will think humanity died in the war, Dr. Park said. They'll remember us as heroes who sacrificed themselves to save everyone else. Which is true, Lena said quietly. Yes, President Moon agreed. It is. The hardest part was telling the people. Across human space, the survivors gathered to hear their president's final announcement. Many had already guessed what was coming. They had seen their friends and families volunteer for integration. They had watched their worlds become fortresses. They understood that the price of victory was the loss of everything they had built. We have a choice, President Moon told them. We can remain visible and powerful, ruling the galaxy as the ancients returned. But if we do, we'll eventually attract new threats from other dimensions. The cycle will repeat. She paused, looking at the faces of people who had already given up so much. Or we can disappear again. We can spread across the galaxy as individuals, living quiet lives while maintaining our vigil. We can be the silent guardians our ancestors were meant to be. The vote was unanimous. Over the following months, the great human diaspora began. Ships carried small groups to distant worlds, where they would blend into local populations and begin new lives. The massive human fleets were decommissioned. The orbital cities were abandoned. The colonial worlds were evacuated. To the galaxy, it looked like humanity was simply fading away, reduced to scattered refugees by the cost of the war. Lena was one of the last to leave Earth. She had been chosen to settle on Altaris, a water world inhabited by the gentle pelagic people. She would live there as a marine biologist, studying alien sea life while carrying the genetic heritage of the ancients. As her ship lifted off from Earth's surface, she watched the planet shrink behind her. The world still pulsed with hidden energy. Its weapons arrays monitoring space for threats that might not come for another 50,000 years. "Will we see home again?" asked the young man sitting beside her. His name was Taemin, and he was heading to a mining colony in the Outer Rim. "Maybe," Lena said, "if the galaxy needs us again." The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its passengers toward their new lives among the stars. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient watch, protected by the consciousness of 2 million volunteers who had chosen to become something more than human. In the years that followed, the galaxy slowly forgot about humanity. The Great War became a legend, the ancients became The Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy sat in perfect silence, staring at the small group of humans who had just changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. President Bora Moon stood at the center of the hall, her simple black dress a sharp contrast to the elaborate robes and biomechanical forms of the alien representatives. Behind her, holographic displays showed image after image of ancient technology, star charts and symbols that every species recognized but none had been able to read. Until now. 50,000 years ago, President Moon said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, the galaxy was ruled by a single civilization. You knew them as the ancients. We know them as our ancestors. The silence stretched on. Then Ambassador Vorthek of the Crystal People stood up, his body reflecting light in angry red patterns. "This is impossible," he said, his voice like breaking glass. "Humans are a young race. You have been in space for less than 1,000 years. The ancients disappeared before your species even existed." Dr. So-Young Park stepped forward. She had been preparing for this moment for months. "Ambassador Vorthek, your own historical records speak of the ancients' final message. Would you like to hear it in the original language?" She touched a control, and the hall filled with sound. Ancient words in a language that no living being was supposed to understand. But as Dr. Park translated, speaking in perfect Vorthak crystal song, the alien ambassador's light patterns shifted from angry red to shocked white. You can read the true script," he whispered. "Because we wrote it," Dr. Park said simply. Ambassador Nari Kim, humanity's chief diplomat, activated more displays. "These are genetic comparisons," she said. "Human DNA compared to tissue. Samples from ancient ruins across the galaxy. The match is exact." The Luminary Collective spoke next, their voice a harmony of light and energy. "Even if this is true, why reveal it now? Why hide for so long?" President Moon's expression grew grave. "Because we were protecting you. All of you." She gestured to the displays, which now showed the star charts from the ancient stations. Systems marked in red spreading across the galaxy like a plague. The ancients didn't disappear by choice. They were forced into hiding by an enemy that consumed entire civilizations, an enemy we called the Void Hunger. General Kithak of the hive minds buzzed with agitation. "The stellar collapses. You're saying they're not natural?" "They're the beginning," Admiral Jinwoo Lee said, stepping forward. "The Void Hunger has returned, just as our ancestors predicted it would." The hall erupted in noise. Representatives, arguing in dozens of languages, some demanding proof, others refusing to believe. A few beginning to understand the horrible implications. Through it all, Elder High Chancellor Nexus of the Galactic Council sat motionless. He was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had studied ancient ruins his entire life. "Silence," he said, and his voice carried the authority of 10,000 years of leadership. The hall fell quiet. "Show us," he said simply. Dr. Yunji Kwan had been waiting for this request. She was the galaxy's expert on ancient technology, though no one, except humans, had known that until today. She walked to an ancient control panel that had sat in the assembly hall for centuries, a relic that no one had ever been able to activate. She placed her hand on it. The panel came alive with light. Symbols flowed across its surface like water. Information streamed through the air in holographic displays that showed the real-time status of ancient facilities across the galaxy. The representatives stared as hidden installations revealed themselves. weapons platforms the size of moons, factories that had been building ships for 50,000 years, defense networks that spanned entire star systems. By the seven suns, whispered the Altarian delegate. How many installations are there? Thousands, Dr. Kwan said. On every world that supports intelligent life, our ancestors left guardians, hidden facilities that would awaken when the void hunger returned. And you control all of this? Chancellor Nexus asked. We are all of this, President Moon replied. Every ancient facility recognizes human genetic patterns because we built them. Every ancient ship responds to human commands because they were designed for us. She paused, looking around the hall at faces that showed fear, wonder, and growing understanding. But we are not your conquerors, she continued. We are your guardians. Everything our ancestors built was designed to protect the civilizations they helped grow. Ambassador Zethara of the Aquatic Pelagic spoke for the first time. You created us? Not created. Guided. Helped. Protected. Elder Eugen's song's ancient voice carried across the hall. Our ancestors seeded the galaxy with life and then withdrew so that life could grow naturally. But they always planned to return if the great enemy came back. The displays changed again, showing recordings from the First War against the Void Hunger. Images of battles fought in space and time itself. Humans sacrificing everything to protect worlds that hadn't even evolved intelligent life yet. This is why we disappeared, President Moon explained. Not because we were defeated, but because our very presence drew the void hunger to us. Advanced civilizations create signals in dimensional space that the entities can track across vast distances. So you made yourselves primitive, Chancellor Nexus said, understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. We gave up everything, Dr. Park confirmed. Technology, knowledge, even our memories of who we were. Our ancestors lived as simple people on a single world while the galaxy grew around them. But you remembered how to activate all this? General Kythak asked, gesturing at the displays. The knowledge was encoded in our DNA, Dr. Kwan explained. Sleeping genetic memories that would awaken when we encountered ancient technology. Commander Tae-Young Yoon, still wearing the uniform of the ancient dreadnought Eternal Dawn, spoke from her position near the back of the hall. The process isn't complete yet, she said. We've only activated a fraction of the ancient systems. Most of our people are still learning how to use technology that their ancestors built. How long will it take? Asked Admiral Kethavar of the Vorthak military. Years, Admiral Lee replied honestly. Maybe decades to fully reactivate everything. We don't have years, Chancellor Nexus said grimly. The entities are destroying systems faster than we can evacuate them. President Moon nodded. Which is why we need your help. The statement surprised everyone. The humans had just revealed that they were the legendary ancients, masters of technology beyond imagination, and now they were asking for help. The void hunger adapts, Dr. Park explained. They learn from every battle. Our ancestors barely defeated them the first time, and that was with technology at its peak. We're working with incomplete systems and partial knowledge. What do you need from us? Chancellor Nexus asked. Time, resources, and trust. President Moon's voice was steady, but urgent. We need time to activate more systems. We need the industrial capacity of your civilizations to build weapons and ships, and we need you to trust that we're not trying to conquer you. Ambassador Vorthak's light patterns had shifted to thoughtful blue. How do we know you won't simply take over once the threat is gone? President Moon smiled sadly. Because if we win this war, we'll face the same choice our ancestors did. The ancients' presence in the galaxy will eventually attract the void hunger again. We'll have to disappear once more, or risk bringing destruction to everyone we've tried to protect. The hall fell silent again as the implications sank in. The humans weren't revealing themselves to reclaim an ancient empire. They were sacrificing their hidden existence to save the galaxy from a threat that only they understood. There's something else, Dr. Kwan said quietly. The ancient records show that winning the war requires more than just technology. It requires sacrifice on a scale that the galaxy has never seen. She activated one final display, showing the true cost of the ancient weapons. Ships that required their crews to give their life force to power them. Weapons that consumed the user's souls to fire a single shot. Defenses that could only be activated by willing volunteers who would be permanently integrated into the systems. Our ancestors didn't just defeat the void hunger, Dr. Kwan continued. They became part of the weapons that defeated it. Millions of humans merged their consciousness with ancient technology to create a defense network that lasted 50,000 years. And you're asking us to do the same, General Kithek said. We're asking you to help us find another way. President, Moon replied. Our ancestors had no choice. They were alone against an enemy that consumed entire dimensions. But we're not alone. We have all of you. Chancellor Nexus stood up, his ancient form moving slowly but with dignity. The Council will need time to consider this information. Chancellor, Admiral Lee said urgently, we don't have much time. The entities are moving toward the core systems. Within months, they'll reach worlds with billions of inhabitants. Then, we will make our decision quickly. Chancellor Nexus looked around the hall. All representatives will return to their governments immediately. We will reconvene in 1 week with full authority to act. As the representatives filed out of the hall, talking in urgent whispers, President Moon stood alone at the center of the Great Chamber. The holographic displays still showed the ancient. The first star died on a Tuesday. The Helios system had been home to 6 billion Vorthak for over 2,000 years. Their crystal cities caught the light of their orange sun and threw rainbows across 3 different worlds. It was beautiful, and peaceful and safe. Then the sun started changing. At first, the Vorthak scientists thought it was just a normal solar fluctuation. Stars got brighter and dimmer all the time. But this was different. The sun wasn't just getting dimmer. It was getting older. In 3 days, it aged 1,000,000 years. The Vorthak tried to evacuate, but there wasn't enough time. On Thursday, the star collapsed into itself and became a black hole. The 3 worlds were pulled apart, and 6 billion people died. The Galactic Council called it a tragic natural disaster, but Dr. So-Young Park, watching from Earth, knew better. She had seen this pattern in the ancient records. The void hunger had returned. How many more? President Bo-Ra Moon asked during their emergency meeting. 17 systems in the past month, Admiral Jin-Woo Lee reported. All of them on the outer edge of the galaxy, all of them showing the same pattern, rapid stellar collapse followed by complete system destruction. Dr. Heirin Choi brought up holographic displays showing the affected systems. It's not random, they're moving inward, in a spiral pattern, testing our defenses. What defenses? Captain Min Ho-jang asked. The Galactic Council doesn't even know what they're fighting. That was the problem. The galaxy's military forces were designed to fight other aliens, not interdimensional monsters that could age stars to death. Their weapons were useless. Their ships were too slow. Their leaders didn't understand what they were facing. President Moon had tried to warn them. She had sent messages to the Galactic Council explaining what humanity had discovered about the void hunger. But the Council had dismissed their warnings. Humans are a young race, the Vorthak ambassador had said. They lack the wisdom to interpret ancient artifacts correctly. Their translation methods are primitive, agreed the Luminary Collective. We have studied the ancient ruins for centuries. There is no evidence of this void hunger. The Council had treated humanity's warnings as the confused fear of a species that didn't understand what they had found. Some Council members had even suggested that humanity might be responsible for the stellar collapses. Perhaps their primitive excavations have damaged some ancient technology. The Kithara hive mind had suggested they should be banned from further archaeological work. So humanity had been forced to prepare alone. Captain Zhang stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching reports come in from across human space. Ancient facilities were activating everywhere. Weapons systems that had slept for 50,000 years were coming online. Ships were being built in hidden factories. The Jakarta facility is at 70% power, reported Commander Tae Young-yoon. She was their best pilot and had been chosen to command the first reactivated ancient warship. We should have our first dreadnought ready within the week. Good, Captain Zhang said. We'll need it. The ancient dreadnoughts were incredible machines. They were 2 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets. Their hulls were made of metal that existed in multiple dimensions at once. They could travel faster than light without using the jump gates that other ships depended on. But even with these amazing ships, humanity was outnumbered. The void hunger wasn't just one enemy. It was thousands of entities, each one capable of destroying entire star systems. Dr. Wu Jin Han, the expert on ancient weapons, had been studying the enemy's tactics. They're smart, he reported. They're not just destroying randomly. They're cutting off the galaxy's communication and supply lines, isolating systems before they attack. How long before they reach the core worlds? President Moon asked. 6 months, maybe less. And when they do, the Council will finally understand what they're facing. But by then, it might be too late. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Elder Yu Jin Song had been studying the personal records of ancient humans, trying to understand how their ancestors had lived during the First War with the Void Hunger. They weren't just fighting for themselves, she reported. The ancient humans were protecting something, younger races that they had helped to evolve. The current galactic civilizations, Dr. Park said. Yes, but there's more. The ancient humans didn't just fight the void hunger, they studied it. They learned how it thinks, how it moves, how it chooses its targets. Elder Song brought up records that made everyone in the room go quiet. They showed humans who had volunteered to be partially consumed by the void hunger, allowing the enemy to feed on them while scientists studied the process. They sacrificed themselves to learn the enemy's weaknesses, Elder Song continued. And they found them. What kind of weaknesses? Admiral Lee asked. The void hunger exists in multiple dimensions, but their connection to our dimension is fragile. If you can disrupt that connection, you can hurt them, maybe even destroy them. Dr. Choi studied the ancient research data. The weapons we've been building are based on this research. They don't just fire energy. They fire reality itself, disrupting the dimensional barriers that the void hunger depends on. It was brilliant science, but it came with a terrible cost. The ancient records showed that using these weapons required enormous amounts of energy that had to come from somewhere. The ancient humans powered their weapons with their own life force, Dr. Han realized. They literally gave their lives to fire each shot. The room fell silent. The weapons they needed to win the war would kill the people who used them. There has to be another way, President Moon said. Maybe there is, Elder Song said quietly, but we won't find it in time. The decision was made for them 3 days later. A Galactic Council battle fleet encountered a small group of void hunger entities near the Centauri system. The fleet consisted of 50 ships from 6 different species, armed with the most advanced weapons the galaxy had ever built. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, most of the fleet was gone. Not destroyed, consumed. The surviving ships sent back horrifying reports of crew members being changed into something else while they were still alive. Ships that had been twisted into impossible shapes that seemed to exist in several places at once. But the worst part was what the entities did after the battle. They didn't just leave. They stayed and began feeding on the space itself, growing larger and stronger. The Galactic Council finally understood that they were facing something beyond their ability to fight. Commander Yoon was in the command center of the first reactivated dreadnought when the Council's emergency message arrived. They were requesting immediate assistance from any power capable of providing aid against the dimensional entities. They're not asking for help from humanity. Specifically, Captain Zhang noted, they're asking for help from anyone who can fight these things. President Moon smiled grimly. Then let's introduce ourselves properly. The ancient dreadnought Eternal Dawn dropped out of hyperspace near the Centauri system like a avenging angel. 2 kilometers of impossible technology, powered by systems that the galaxy had forgotten how to build. The void hunger entities were still there, feeding on the debris of the destroyed fleet. They were massive things that seemed to shift between different shapes, sometimes looking like ships, sometimes like creatures, sometimes like geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Commander Yoon sat in the captain's chair that had been built for her ancestors 50,000 years ago. The ship's systems responded to her thoughts as much as her commands. "All weapons charged and ready," reported her weapons officer. "Fire." The ancient weapons tore reality apart. Dimensional barriers collapsed and reformed. The void between dimensions bled into normal space. The void hunger entities screamed, not with sound but with something deeper. They screamed across dimensions as the weapons disrupted their connection to our reality. 2 of the entities were destroyed completely. The third was badly damaged but managed to escape into hyperspace. When the battle was over, Commander Yoon opened a communication channel to the surviving council ships. "This is the human vessel Eternal Dawn," she said calmly. "We're here to help." The response from the council ships was chaos. Questions in a dozen languages, demands to know where humanity had found such advanced technology, accusations that humans must have made a deal with the entities. But Admiral Kethavar of the Vorthak military, commander of the surviving council forces, cut through the noise with a simple question. "Can you kill more of them?" "Yes," Commander Yoon replied. "But first we need to talk." 3 hours later, President Moon received a formal request from the Galactic Council for an emergency session on Nexus Prime. The message was simple. The MAI Council requests the immediate presence of human representatives to discuss matters of galactic security. Please bring information about your new military capabilities. President Moon looked at the message for a long time. Once she responded. To it there would be no going back. Humanity would have to reveal the truth about who they really were. "Ma'am?" Admiral Lee asked. President Moon made her decision. "Send a reply. Tell them we'll be there. And tell them to bring everyone. What we have to say concerns the entire galaxy." Outside Luna Station, the stars continued their ancient dance. But now they danced under the shadow of an enemy that could. The news traveled fast through human space, but it was kept secret from the aliens. President Bo Ra-Moon called an emergency meeting of all human leaders. They met on Luna Station, high above Earth, in a room that had no windows. What they talked about could not be heard by other ears. "Are we sure about this?" President Moon asked. She was a strong woman who had led humans through many difficult times. But this news made even her feel small. Dr. So-Young Park stood at the front of the room with her reports. "We've found 12 more stations since the first one. All of them have the same symbols. All of them respond to human DNA. The aliens can't even turn on the lights, but when we touch the controls, everything works." Admiral Jinwoo Lee, the head of the human military, shook his head. 50,000 years. We ruled half the galaxy. 50,000 years ago, and then we just disappeared? "Not disappeared," said Dr. Heiran Choi. She was young, only 29, but she was the smartest scientist they had. She had been studying the ancient technology for weeks. "We went into hiding. The records are clear about that." "Why?" President Moon asked. "What were we hiding from?" Dr. Park touched a button, and the room filled with holographic images from the ancient stations. The void hunger. That's what our ancestors called it. From what I can translate, they weren't from our dimension. They came from somewhere else, somewhere dark. The hologram showed star charts with red marks spreading across them like a disease, system after system going dark. They consumed entire civilizations, Dr. Park continued. Not just killed them, consumed them. Turned them into something else. Something wrong. Captain Min Ho-jang had been quiet until now. He was a Special Forces soldier who had been exploring the ancient sites. "I've seen some of the deeper records," he said. "Our ancestors fought them for 1,000 years. We won, but barely. And they knew the things would come back. So our ancestors faked their own disappearance," Admiral Lee said. "Made it look like they died out naturally." "More than that," Dr. Choi said. "They seeded the galaxy with younger races. The Vorthak, the Luminary, all of them. Our ancestors helped them grow, helped them learn, but never told them the truth. President Moon stood up and walked to where the holographic galaxy spun slowly in the air. They were protecting them, keeping them safe while we prepared for the real enemy to return. Elder Yujin Song, the oldest human in the room, finally spoke. She was 87 years old and had spent her whole life studying human history. "There's something else," she said in her quiet voice. "Something the records mention but don't explain clearly. Our ancestors didn't just hide, they changed themselves." "What do you mean?" President Moon asked. "They made themselves smaller, weaker. They gave up their advanced technology and went back to a simple life on Earth. They became the humans we know today." Dr. Choi nodded. "That would explain why we lost so much knowledge, why we had to rediscover fire and the wheel in space travel. We weren't primitive. We chose to become primitive." "But why?" "Because the void hunger tracks advanced technology," Captain Jang said. "The more powerful you become, the easier it is for them to find you. Our ancestors became invisible by becoming simple." The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, President Moon spoke again. "And now?" Dr. Park touched another button. New holograms appeared, showing recent star charts from the edge of the galaxy. 3 systems have gone dark in the past month. The Galactic Council thinks it's natural stellar collapse, but the pattern matches what our ancestors recorded. "The void hunger is coming back," Admiral Lee said. "Yes, and when they do, the current galactic civilization won't be ready. The Vorthak and Luminary are powerful, but they've never faced anything like this." Captain Jang leaned forward. "So what do we do? Tell them the truth? Would they believe us?" Elder Song asked. "Would you believe that a race you thought was young and weak was actually the legendary ancients?" President Moon looked around the room. "We need more information. We need to activate more of the ancient sites and learn everything we can about the void hunger. But we do it quietly. Over the next few months, human teams secretly explored ancient sites across the galaxy. They found weapons that could destroy planets. They found ships that could travel faster than light without using the gates the other races depended on. They found factories that could build entire fleets in days instead of years. But the most important discovery was made by Dr. Choi on a hidden facility near the galactic core. She found the records of the final battle against the void hunger. "They're not just monsters," she reported to the Emergency Council. "They're smart. They learn. They adapt. Our ancestors barely won the first time, and that was with technology far beyond what the galaxy has now." "What kind of weapons work against them?" Admiral Lee asked. "That's the problem. Normal weapons don't work at all. Energy weapons, missiles, even nuclear bombs. The void hunger exists partly in our dimension and partly in theirs. You need special weapons that can reach into both dimensions at once." "Do we have those weapons?" "We're starting to build them. The ancient factories are coming online, but slowly. It will take time. Time they might not have." Reports from the galaxy's edge were getting worse. Entire fleets were disappearing. The Galactic Council was starting to panic, but they still didn't know what they were really facing. Captain Jang led a secret mission to Earth itself. What they found there changed everything they thought they knew about their home planet. "Earth isn't natural," he reported. "The whole planet was built by our ancestors. It's one giant ancient facility, disguised to look like a normal world." "What do you mean, built?" President Moon asked. "The continents are in the wrong places for a natural planet. The moon is too big and too perfectly round. When you know what to look for, you can see the machinery underneath everything." Dr. Choi had been studying the Earth records. "It's a command center. The whole planet is designed to coordinate the galaxy's defense against the void hunger. The mountains are sensor arrays, the oceans hide massive weapon systems. Even the moon is artificial. Our ancestors lived on a warship," Elder Song said quietly. "For 50,000 years we've been living on the greatest warship ever built, and we never knew." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just been the ancients. They had turned their home into the ultimate weapon against the darkness that was coming. But as they learned more, they also discovered something frightening. The ancient systems weren't just waking up because humans were activating them. They were waking up because they sensed something coming. "The automatic defenses are activating," Dr. Choi reported. "Systems that have been sleeping for 50,000 Years are turning themselves on. The planet knows something we don't. 3 days later, they found out what Earth knew. A Galactic Council exploration fleet at the galaxy's edge sent out a distress signal. Then the signal cut off. When rescue ships arrived, they found empty space where the fleet used to be. But worse than the missing ships was what the rescue teams found floating in space. Pieces of ships that had been changed, twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. And inside those twisted pieces, they found crew members who were still alive, but no longer human, no longer alien. They had become something else. Something hungry. Dr. Park studied the reports with growing horror. "It's starting," she said. "The void hunger is here." President Moon stood at the window of Luna Station, looking down at Earth. The planet looked peaceful and blue, but now she knew better. Underneath that calm surface, ancient weapons were waking up, preparing for a war that had been delayed for 50,000 years. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Based on the ancient records," Dr. Park said, "maybe a year, maybe less. Then, we need to decide. Do we tell the galaxy the truth, or do we prepare to fight this war alone?" Admiral Lee joined her at the window. "If we fight alone, we'll lose. The galaxy needs to know what they're facing. And if we tell them the truth, they might not believe us. Or worse, they might fear us more than the void hunger." President Moon made the hardest decision of her life. "We prepare for both. We get ready to fight, but we also get ready to reveal who we really are." Far below them, Earth continued its ancient watch, its hidden sensors reaching across the galaxy, counting the days until the darkness returned. The space around Kepler Nebula was quiet, too quiet for Commander Dae-ho Kim's liking. He stood on the bridge of the human ship Dawn's Edge, watching the swirling purple and gold clouds of gas that stretched across the darkness. His team had been out here for 3 weeks looking for new planets that humans could live on. "Commander," called out his communications officer, "we're getting some strange readings from Sector 7. Dae-ho walked over to look at the screen. The readings showed something big hiding in the nebula, something metal, something that shouldn't be there. "How big?" he asked. "About the size of a small moon, sir." Dae-ho felt his heart beat faster. Nothing that big should be floating out here in empty space. "Send a message to Dr. Park. Tell her to get ready. We might have found something interesting." Dr. So-Young Park was the best at studying old things that aliens had left behind. She had spent years learning the languages of dead civilizations. When she got the message, she was all ready. Putting on her spacesuit, the Dawn's Edge moved slowly toward the object. As they got closer, everyone on the bridge stopped talking. The thing was huge. It looked like a space station, but it was bigger than any space station anyone had ever built. Its metal surface was covered in strange symbols and patterns that seemed to glow with their own light. "My God," whispered the pilot. "What is that thing?" "I don't know," Dae-ho said, "but we're going to find out." The station looked very old, but it wasn't broken down like most ancient things they found. It looked like it was sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it up. Dr. Park joined them on the bridge. She was a small woman with smart eyes that missed nothing. When she saw the station, she grabbed the nearest chair to steady herself. "Commander," she said in a quiet voice, "this isn't like anything we've found before. Look at those symbols. They're not from any known alien race. Can you read them?" Dae-ho asked. "I'm not sure. Some of them look familiar, but that's impossible." They sent out scanner beams to study the station. The results were amazing. The technology inside was far beyond anything humans or aliens had today. The power source was still working after thousands of years. The metal was stronger than anything they knew how to make. "There's an opening on the south side," reported the science officer. "It looks like a docking bay." Dae-ho made a decision that would change everything. "Prepare a boarding team. Dr. Park, you're with me." "Sir," said his second officer, "maybe we should call for backup first." "No," Dae-ho said. "If we call this in now, the Galactic Council will take over. They'll want to study it themselves and give us the leftover information. This is humanity's discovery." 2 hours later, a small team floated through space toward the ancient station. Daeho, Dr. Park, and 4 other humans moved carefully through the darkness. Their helmet lights cut through the shadows as they approached the docking bay. The station's systems seemed to know they were coming. Lights began turning on along the outer hull. The docking bay opened like a giant mouth, welcoming them inside. "The air inside is good," Dr. Park said, checking her instruments. "We can breathe in there." They landed their shuttle inside the bay. The space was enormous. It could have held 100 ships their size. But what made everyone stop and stare were the symbols on the walls. They glowed with soft blue light covering every surface. Dr. Park pulled out her camera and started taking pictures. As she worked, she felt a strange feeling in her chest. She had seen writing like this before. But where? "Commander," called out Sergeant Min Ho from across the bay. "You need to see this." They followed him to a wall covered in what looked like a map. It showed the whole galaxy, with lines connecting different star systems. Some systems were marked in red, others in blue. "It's a star chart," Dr. Park said. "But look at this." She pointed to a small yellow star near the edge of the map. "That's our sun. That's Earth." Daeho leaned closer. Earth was marked with a special symbol that appeared nowhere else on the map. Below it were symbols that looked like writing. Dr. Park took out her tools and started working on the symbols. As she translated, her hands began to shake. "What does it say?" Daeho asked. I think it says home." "Home? But this station is thousands of years old. Humans weren't even in space thousands of years ago." Dr. Park didn't answer. She was staring at more symbols near the Earth marker. Her face had gone very pale. "Doctor, what is it?" "Commander," she whispered. "These aren't alien symbols. Some of them are very old Korean letters, and some are ancient English." The team looked at each other in shock. That was impossible. Humans had only been exploring space for a few hundred years. This station was ancient. "You must be wrong," Daeho said. "I'm not wrong." Dr. Park's voice was stronger now. "Look at this symbol here. It's the Korean character for star. And this one means journey. And this English word here, it says remember." They spent the next 6 hours exploring the station. They found rooms full of machines they didn't understand. They found libraries with books written in symbols that Dr. Park said were very old human languages. They found star charts showing travel routes between worlds that humans had never visited. But the most shocking discovery was in what looked like a control room. On the main screen they found records, files full of information about the station and who built it. Dr. Park worked for hours to translate the files. When she was done, she sat down hard in the nearest chair. "What did you find?" Daeho asked. "According to these records," she said, "this station was built 50,000 years ago. It was built by humans." "That's impossible." "The records are very clear. Humans didn't start on Earth. We were already traveling between stars 50,000 years ago. We had an empire that covered half the galaxy." Daeho felt the world spinning around him. "Then what happened? Where did we go?" Dr. Park looked at more files. "Something scared us. Something made us leave all of this behind and go into hiding. The records call it the void hunger. They say it was coming back. Coming back from where? I don't know. But according to this, our ancestors knew it would return someday. They left all of this technology hidden, waiting for us to find it when we were ready." Daeho walked to the big window that looked out at space. The stars looked different now. They weren't just points of light anymore. They were places where humans used to live. "Doctor," he said quietly, "what does this mean for us?" "I think it means we're not who we thought we were. All those ancient ruins the galaxy talks about, all that advanced technology that nobody understands, I think it was all ours." Dr. Park found one more file. This one was different. It was a message recorded 50,000 years ago. When she played it, a hologram appeared. It showed a human woman in clothes they had never seen before. She spoke in Old Korean, but Dr. Park could understand some of it. "She's warning about something," Dr. Park translated. "She says the void hunger will return when the stars begin to die. She says the younger races won't be ready. She says..." Dr. Park stopped talking. "What does she say?" She says the children will have to remember who they really are. Daeho looked around the ancient station built by his own people. We're the children, he said. Yes, and I think it's time for us to remember. Outside the station, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that humanity had just discovered its true past. In distant parts of the galaxy, other ancient stations began to wake up, their systems responding to signals from the station in Kepler Nebula. The children of the ancients had come home. The war began with silence. One moment the Helicon system was full of life, 3 billion luminary floating in the warm clouds of their gas giant home. The next moment, there was nothing. No distress signals, no explosions, no debris. The entire system simply stopped existing in normal space. Fleet Admiral Kyungsoo Park watched the reports from the bridge of the ancient dreadnought Eternal Dawn. Around him, the combined fleets of the galaxy hung in space like a wall of metal and energy. Humans, Vorthak, Luminari, Kythera, and dozens of other species, all working together for the first time in galactic history. That's the 15th system in 3 days, reported Commander Subin Lee from her fighter squadron. They're not just destroying anymore, they're taking entire systems into their dimension. Admiral Park nodded grimly. The Void Hunger had learned new tactics during their long exile. Instead of consuming systems slowly, they were pulling entire star systems into the twisted space they called home. Billions of people disappeared in seconds, trapped in a realm where the laws of physics worked differently. Admiral, called out his communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from Earth. The holographic image of Master Engineer Donghyun Cho appeared on the bridge. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright with purpose. The planetary defenses are fully active, he reported. All continental weapon arrays are online. Luna, station is ready for combat operations. Admiral Park studied the tactical displays. Earth looked different now that its true nature was revealed. The blue and green surface was crossed with lines of energy that connected massive weapons hidden beneath the continents. The moon had opened like a flower, revealing the battle station that it had always been. How many lives? Admiral Park asked quietly. Engineer Cho understood the question. The planetary weapons couldn't be operated by computers alone. They required human volunteers to merge their consciousness with the control systems, becoming living parts of the defense network. 50,000 volunteers in the first wave, Engineer Cho replied. More arriving every hour. 50,000 people willing to give up their individual existence to become part of something larger. Admiral Park had seen the process during the tests. The volunteers entered the integration chambers as humans and emerged as something new. Still thinking, still conscious, but forever connected to the ancient machines. They know what they're choosing? Admiral Park asked. Yes, sir. They all know. The conversation was interrupted by alerts from the sensor stations. Space itself was beginning to twist near the edge of the system. Reality was bending as something enormous pushed its way through from another dimension. Here they come, Commander Lee said from her fighter. The first Void Hunger entity appeared like a wound in space. It was impossible to look at directly. The human mind couldn't process something that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The ship's computers tried to create a visual representation and failed, showing only shifting geometric patterns that hurt the eyes. But Admiral Park had fought these things before in smaller numbers. He knew their weaknesses. All ships, remember your training, he broadcast to the fleet. Don't try to understand what you're seeing. Trust your instruments and follow the battle plan. The ancient weapons fired first. Reality disruption beams tore through space, targeting the dimensional anchors that kept the entities stable in normal space. The attacks worked. The first entity screamed across multiple dimensions as its connection to their realm was severed, but more were coming. Dozens of them, each one the size of a small moon. They moved through space like living nightmares, their very presence causing stars to flicker and planets to shift in their orbits. The galactic fleet opened fire with everything they had: energy beams, kinetic projectiles, antimatter warheads. The weapons of 100 different civilizations all focused on the approaching horror. The Void Hunger entities didn't even seem to notice. Conventional weapons are useless, reported the Vorthak battle coordinator. Our strongest attacks are passing right through them. Fall back to Plan Beta, Admiral Park ordered. Ancient weapons only. The human dreadnoughts moved forward, their reality disruption weapons charging. But there were only 12 ancient ships active and dozens of entities. The math was simple and terrible. "This is Commander Lee," came the voice from the fighter squadrons. "My pilots are requesting permission to use the soul-burn weapons." Admiral Park closed his eyes. The soul-burn weapons were fighter-scale versions of the ancient technology. They could hurt the void hunger, but they killed their pilots in the process. Each shot literally burned the pilot's life force to power the dimensional disruption. "Permission granted," he said quietly. "All volunteers only." "Sir?" Commander Lee's voice was steady. "We're all volunteers." The fighter squadrons dove toward. The entities like tiny sparks against the darkness. Their soul-burn weapons flashed once, twice, 3 times. Each flash cost a human life, but each flash also wounded the ancient enemy. The battle raged for hours. Ancient dreadnoughts maneuvered through space that was increasingly unstable as reality itself began to break down under the dimensional stress. Galactic Council ships provided support, their conventional weapons useless against the entities but effective against the smaller creatures that the void hunger spawned. But slowly, inevitably, the fleet was losing. For every entity they destroyed, 2 more emerged from the dimensional rifts. The ancient weapons were incredibly powerful, but they required enormous energy to fire, energy that came from human lives. "Admiral," Engineer Cho's voice came from Earth. "The planetary weapons are ready to fire." "Negative," Admiral Park replied. "Too many friendlies in the target zone." "Sir, if we don't fire now, the entities will reach Earth. The whole planet will be consumed." Admiral Park looked at the tactical display. The engineer was right. Despite their efforts, several entities had broken through the fleet's defensive line and were heading straight for humanity's homeworld. "All ships, emergency retreat to coordinates Gamma 7, he ordered. "Earth weapons are going online." The surviving ships pulled back as Earth revealed its true power. The continents themselves began to glow as massive weapons arrays emerged from beneath the surface. The Atlantic Ocean parted, revealing a cannon the size of a city. The Himalayas unfolded like metal petals, exposing targeting arrays that had been disguised as mountains. But the most impressive sight was the moon. The ancient battle station opened completely, its surface bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Energy began building in its core, power drawn from the 50,000 humans who had volunteered to become part of the system. "Planetary weapons charging," came the voice of the integrated volunteers. It wasn't one voice anymore, but thousands speaking in perfect harmony. "Target acquired. Dimensional barriers mapped. Firing in 10 seconds. The void hunger entities, sensing the buildup of ancient energy, changed course toward Earth. They moved, faster now, desperate to reach the source of the weapons before they could fire. 5 seconds. The entities were close enough now that their presence was affecting Earth's gravity. Tides rose on every ocean. The planet's magnetic field fluctuated wildly. 2 seconds. Admiral Park watched from his ship as the entities prepared to consume the world that had been humanity's secret home for 50,000 years. Fire. The moon exploded with light, not destroyed, but unleashing energy that had been stored for millennia. The beam that emerged was wider than the planet itself, made not of matter or energy, but of pure reality enforcement. It struck the Sei lead entity and simply erased it from existence across all dimensions. The continental weapons fired a moment later. Beams of crystallized space-time lanced out from every continent, each one guided by the consciousness of volunteers who had given up their individual existence to become part of the planetary defense network. In minutes, it was over. The void, hunger entities that had threatened Earth were gone, not just destroyed but removed from reality itself. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The planetary weapons had burned out after firing. The 50,000 volunteers were gone, their consciousness scattered across the dimensional barriers they had helped maintain. The moon was dark now, its ancient systems exhausted. "Report," Admiral Park said quietly. "Entities in this sector are eliminated," came the reply. "But Admiral, We're receiving signals from across the galaxy. They're attacking everywhere at once. The tactical displays lit up with red markers. Hundreds of void hunger entities were emerging from dimensional rifts near every major population center in the galaxy. The attack on Earth had been just one part of a massive coordinated assault. How many planets have planetary-scale ancient weapons? Admiral Park asked, though he already knew the answer. Just Earth, Engineer Cho replied. The other hidden facilities are smaller. They can support individual ships and weapons, but nothing like what we just used. Admiral Park studied the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Billions of people were about to face an enemy that conventional weapons couldn't touch. The ancient technology could hurt the void hunger, but there wasn't enough of it, and every shot cost human lives. Sir, Commander Lee's voice was weak. She had survived the battle, but her ship was badly damaged and most of her pilots were gone. What are your orders? Admiral Park looked at the darkened moon, thinking.